Hi everyone, this short video is just going to develop some of our background knowledge related to some key terms and vocabulary, but also make sure that we are all on the same page with the correct vocabulary that's going to be really important as we move forward in this course. So some of the things that we're going to be exploring in this course together are key terms related to diversity or equity, inclusion as it relates to special education and what that means for us to be professionals in that field, but also professionals that need to collaborate in order to achieve the goals to serve the students that we work with. So let's talk for a second about something, and these are not new concepts or new terms, but because there has been an increased focus in talking about some of these terms in more broad ways, as opposed to in our field. We would just want to make sure we ground ourselves in how we are using these terms and what they mean for us as educational professionals. So the question at the top of this slide is just, how does teaching support equitable learning environments? And the answer is it does, but we're going to be spending time learning about that. So to get started, sometimes it's easy to get confused about the term equity versus equality and so on. So let's be clear, for the purpose of this session, equity is defined as each child or student that we work with receiving what it is that they need to develop to their full academic and social potential. And as teachers and educational professionals, our everyday instructional choices and actions directly impact our students in a lot of ways. And it's important for us to not put a lot of that on our shoulders as a weight we have to carry, but it is important to remind ourselves that we can't control everything, but that what we do actually matters quite a bit in terms of what our students are going to learn and experience, and we are going to be supporting them along their journey to becoming who they are, kind of one moment at a time. So in our definitions, you might be wondering, well, how is equality different from equity? And this is a very commonly used image to talk about this. So you've seen it before. We use it a lot, but we're just going to use it again to help make it clear what it is that we're doing in this course and in our profession. So in the left hand, you see the two terms, and then on the right hand, you see an image that helps to illustrate what that kind of means. And then we're going to take it a step further with our next slide. So equality is the idea that everyone is, for the most part, treated the same regardless of their circumstances or their specific needs. So in that picture on the left with equality, what you see is there are three people who are at different heights, and each of them are standing on a box to look over a fence. And in this case, it's a baseball game, but it could be anything, but it's illustrating that everybody received the same box regardless of how tall they are, right? Equity is that you're recognizing there are differences in needs that people have, and then therefore you offer what might be needed to that person in order to achieve desired outcomes. You see in the picture on the right for equity, that means the taller person doesn't need a box, so he doesn't have one. And in the middle, the person only needs one, has one, and the smallest little kiddo there has two boxes so that everybody is able to see over the fence. It's not about everybody receiving a box. It's about keeping that outcome in mind, which is they're trying to see the game and see over the fence. But if we took it a step further, sometimes as special educators who are deeply invested in inclusion, which will be another term we talk about in this first module, we have to ask, what if the fence wasn't there at all? And when we learn about universal design for learning or inclusive practices, we find ourselves asking about barriers to achieving a goal. So educators can do important work of offering student support to overcome barriers, which can be like providing accommodations, which we do, but we can also do the work and determine if we can actually remove barriers altogether and then potentially equip our students and our colleagues to do the same. And you see that illustrated in this picture all the way over there on the right, where the idea is if you wanted to watch the game, maybe let's not have a fence, right? And then we don't need the boxes and there isn't a fence and we're just able to see the game because that's what we were trying to achieve. So when we think about special education and being a professional that will collaborate with others, we're going to talk about all of those things in this course, but sometimes we're working to identify when an accommodation or a support is needed to achieve overcoming a barrier. But sometimes we're able to determine that that barrier doesn't need to be there. And you'll hear in the future when we talk about universal design for learning as one framework, the idea of retrofitting versus intentionally designing environments from the start that are as inclusive as they could possibly be for all types of learners and students, regardless of what their specific needs are. And so you'll hear that term retrofitting, and you'll see this image again come up as a way that we can talk about understanding how we provide services and supports to students who might need something different or have a barrier to their success that we might need to remove. A couple more notes just to ground us for the rest of this course is thinking about how our teaching practices support equitable learning environments for our students. So it's the reminder that all educators enter the classroom with their own beliefs and experiences, and that can be about how students learn or just in general what they believe about how teaching impacts students or about their community that they bring into the schools based on your experiences, based on what we've learned from articles, from colleagues, and some of these beliefs might be aligned to best practices, but it is important for us to also recognize that sometimes we might have misconceptions or biases, and these can lead to potentially less effective or less equitable teaching. So we have to do the important work of analyzing or considering whether or not we're really bringing a bias to the table. And that means we have to evaluate our own beliefs kind of throughout our experiences. So even when those things come from good intentions, like thinking, oh, I've seen lots of teachers do this, and this is the way I learned to do something, and this is how I believe about something, and that comes from a place of good intentions, it can sometimes result in less effective teaching practices that can inadvertently harm students, and therefore our communities that are filled with people who have different experiences and beliefs and levels of understanding and so on. And that's especially true historically, especially for students with disabilities. So understanding not only best practices, but our own beliefs and thoughts and experiences is very important. So as we proceed through this course, you're going to often be asked to explain or reflect on concepts that you're learning about related to diversity or equity or inclusion, and what that means for collaborating with others or collaborating with our community and working with parents and families to achieve the goals of students with disabilities, so that you're reflecting on those concepts and making connections to what the definition is, your experiences, but then thinking, what's the purpose of serving this school or this student or this family? Or how can I help my colleague to achieve a goal they're trying to achieve, and so on. So part of teaching and doing those things and effective collaboration is building the habit of becoming aware of your thinking, so metacognition, thinking about your thinking, and therefore thinking about how your choices and your beliefs or your colleagues or your school choices, all of the choices that are made impact students and therefore their potential life outcomes.